should not be, in my opinion, he shouldn't be. He's already offered to talk to the Swedish government about the sexual assault allegations against him, just that he won't do it in Sweden because he thinks he's going to get rendered to the United States there. So, okay, that's a long answer to that question. Sorry.
I think Daniel had this hand up for a while, yeah?
Just a couple of things that Carter you mentioned, and I've been following a little bit on this. You know, this entrapment thing is really now it's becoming the standard procedure because of all the high-profile things that the press talks about, all these so-called local domestic terrorism cases. The majority, vast majority, were entrapment. These were young Muslim men who didn't know what they were doing. They didn't have the means, or even maybe some motive, but mainly they were just kind of young. The FBI provided everything. They provided the weapons, they provided the money, they even gave them all the plans and tell, oh, go do this, go do that. The majority of the vast were like that, but the press only reports that, oh, they got convicted because, you know, so this is becoming a signature thing of the FBI, number one.
In the plea bargain, that it is either you plea bargain with us and we'll put you in for 15 years, or we're going to take you to trial and you'll never see the light of day again. So that's kind of the way that these guys are finally going, if I ever want to get out of here, I've got a plea bargain or something. It's interesting.
Okay, I hope everybody doesn't think this is too off topic, but I'm really interested in you as a person, and I just kind of wonder if you would mind terribly sharing with us a little bit about your life, like how many hours a day do you spend reading, communicating, because it seems like you have a lot of information, it's very current, and I'm just curious myself, like how much of your own personal time you devote to, you know, having information so that when you do talks like this, it's just all there.
Well, it's, you know, like anything that any of us are interested in, and you start reading as much as you can about it, and so this is kind of my like I would say it's my job, because that, you know, job that doesn't have it, but I do. I mean, I don't work for the government anymore. I don't work for anyone else. I have military retirement. I have a State Department retirement that was given because of a fine person in the State Department. When she heard that I was resigning from the State Department, she looked up my personnel records and called me all the way to Mongolia and said, when you're resigning, but you have enough time for you paid into the pension program, and if you want your money, you just put retirement. So it is actually the government's money that I earn that is providing me with the luxury to spend full time doing these types of things, of learning about drones, of traveling around, of you know, the variety of things that we work on, whether it's trying to stop a war in Afghanistan, going to Afghanistan, going to Pakistan, working on issues about the military, of PTSD, suicide, sexual assault in the military. And there's a wide range of things that I'm interested in, and I do give talks on. Drones is just one of them. The Middle East, Gaza, was on the Gaza flotilla in 2010 that got shot up by the Israelis, and was a part of the U.S. boat to Gaza and the second flotilla. I've been to Gaza 5 times since the 2009 attack. I was just there in December of this year again, after the latest attack by the Israelis on Gaza. So there's a lot of things, but you know, that's kind of what I do all the time. This is do a lot of reading and talking and traveling and
This gentleman.
Well, that was what I wanted to ask you too, if you could just speak a little bit about your experience on the flotilla to Gaza, because there seems to be a lot of accusations on both sides about what happened on that. I know 9 or 10 people were killed on the first one. A lot of people say they were point-blank murdered. Were you witness to that?
I was on the 2010 flotilla. There were 6 ships in the flotilla. The one on which 9 people were killed, including an American citizen, and 50 were wounded. was the Marby Marmara. I spent 3 days on the Marby Marmara, and then the day that we turned to go toward Gaza, we were actually circling, waiting for all the boats to catch up with us. And then when they finally arrived, one of the boats was bringing members of the European Parliament on board, and they wanted to go onto the Marby Marmara because there were parliamentarians from other countries that were on that boat, so they wanted to be on that one. So 5 of us got off that boat, went on to a smaller boat. I witnessed the initial attack of the Israelis by boat and by helicopter, but we were offset about 100 yards off the port stern of the Marby Marmara. But I saw helicopters, I saw flashbangs and pings that were going up from the smaller Israeli boats. And then at a certain point, the captains of all the ships started talking to each other, and our captain was told, why don't you take off and see if you can kind of outrun, bring some of those Israeli small boats with you to get them off the Marby Marmara, because they were shooting up a lot of the Marby Marmara at that point.
Was there any provocation for the Israelis to begin shooting is what I'm trying
No,
to
first, there were no weapons that were on board the Marby Marmara. Nobody was shooting from the Marby Marmara at the Israeli soldiers. The soldiers were shooting first at the ship and then sniping from the helicopters and killing people on the top deck of the Marby Marmara. 5 of the 9 people that were killed were shot at point-blank range. Fergan Douan, the American, 19-year-old American fellow, had 5 bullets in his body, 2 of them straight to his head. Anyway, so there were, and on our boat, nobody was shot with lethal ammunition, but with paintballs, which can be lethal. I mean, they can be if they hit you right in the right spot. We had one woman that was hit in her right at the bridge of her nose. If it had been up a little bit more, it could have cracked her skull. We had people that were tasered, beaten up, but none of us had weapons. We were there certainly to challenge the Israeli naval blockade of Gaza, but we carried no weapons and certainly did not expect to be met with lethal force or force of any kind. I mean, they had plenty of ways that they could have turned those ships around if that's what they wanted to do. But they chose not.
International waters too.
And we were in international waters, 70 miles of international waters. And I'll just mention that I was at Turkish court hearing in early November. It's the first time that, well, there have been several investigations by a variety of, the Israelis have done 2 investigations, the Turkish government has done theirs, the UN has done theirs. The United States did not investigate the murder of its American citizen. But the there's been a Turkish court indictment against 4 senior Israeli officials for their role in the planning of the attack on the Gaza flotilla. The Israeli government says, well, this is a kangaroo court. We can't expect any sort of neutral judgment on this. The 4 defendants did not appear at the court hearing, but I and another American citizen flew to the first court hearing and ended up being witnesses where we described what happened, what we saw, and what happened on our boat. There will be another court hearing in February, and at some stage the Turkish court will make a decision on the evidence that has been presented, whether or not it's sufficient to prove the allegations against the 4. And if it is, then with an indictment or with a judgment against the 4, the Turkish government can then take that to Interpol, and if any of the 4 ever leave Israel, traveling internationally, then one could say that they would be arrested upon leaving or arriving at another country, but whether or not indeed the Israeli pressure, government pressure on these sorts of things will be tremendous, as will the United States pressure. But at least it's a movement of a court hearing on the evidence.
So I know we have Celia and Lee, but maybe this gentleman has a response to this.
I do. It's slightly tangential, but before you boarded the flotilla, were you aware of the history involving USS Liberty and the parallels between the engagement that happened? And as a slight addendum to that, will the story of the USS Liberty ever emerge and become more well known?
Well, the USS Liberty, it was a Navy intelligence ship that in 1967, at the beginning of the 67 war, was attacked by the Israeli military. And 34 American citizens on board that boat were killed and 171 that were injured. One of the people that was injured was a guy named Joe Metters, who was actually one of the U.S. citizens that was on board one of the boats in the flotilla. And Joe and I were the two Americans that went to Israel, or went to Turkey to testify in the court hearings.
And those veterans now who are in their 80s and 90s are all dying off, who are on the Liberty, were secretly given medals in the White House, congressional medals, to honor their service, but it's still been kept quiet. And the other thing was that at the time of that attack, the Americans were flying the American flag boldly, and the Israeli planes flew over them for hours before they attacked them. And some of the wisdom on it is that they wanted to seize the Golan Heights of Syria, and they didn't want the United States to interfere with that, and that's why they tried to sink that ship. They attacked that ship for 6.5 hours, and there was an American fleet hours away who were ordered to stand down and allow that ship to be attacked.
That's right. It was
American service
torpedoed.
people. Torpedoed and strafed with airplanes.
And there were planes that were sent from that fleet that was hours away. There was one group of planes that was already heading to the rescue, and they were called back by the White House.
By McNamara.
So there's a long history to this that is a sordid history. A sordid history.
It's beyond sordid. It's treason of the highest order.
Yes.
How is it anything less?
Thank you for bringing it up.
Now we're sending a bunch of bunker busters to Israel to set up Iraq.
Well, the U.S. Annual military allocation to Israel is $3 billion a year. For 10 years, it'll be a total of $30 billion that we are giving just in military aid, plus special
And they have
concessions
national
on
health insurance for
contracts
everybody.
and the whole issue of
We pay for it.
the Israeli push for military action on Iran is it's a very dangerous push, and to the extent that President Obama pushed back from it prior to the election is a credit to him. These sanctions that we have on Iran right now are brutal, as they were for Iraq, for the 10 years that we had sanctions and a quarantine around Iraq. I don't know if you saw on CNN today, Hillary and Everett Mann, who both served in the White House and the National Security Council, and are both Middle East specialists, but they've been out of the government for probably about 10 years now too. They just came back from a trip to Iran, and their assessment was that the sanctions are brutal, but this is not the way that you influence a country and its people to do what you think they ought to be doing, and that we're ending up in the same position as we did with the Iraqis, where people are going to be dying very soon, and these sanctions will not affect the actions of the government.
You remember Madeleine Albright?
Madeleine Albright saying, yeah, it was fine that 500,000 Iraqi kids died because of the malnutrition from the lack of food and medicines because of the U.S. Sanction program on Iraq in the 10 years during the Clinton administration.
Good. Liz Lee, you have a question? You still have a question? when you do have a subject of
I guess I'd like to know, back on the subject of drones, the moral justification by the Obama administration to utilize drones over other kinds of weaponry, as you all discussed here. Now, on a NPR special I heard earlier this year, one of the comments that were made that really puzzled me was that some of the moral justification that the Obama administration used to utilize drone, weaponry was that it wasn't actual pilots, right, that were, actually being threatened, right, through death by, in planes, and that in many ways the pilots of the drones were kind of in this kind of sphere where they're in this room and they're not really engaging it, and so in many ways, I think the term that was used, that it was almost like more moral, like it was more ethical in many ways to engage in these drone technologies because the harm of the pilots would be mitigated, and that there would be more precision, even though of course there are many problems with that argument that but that still there's that moral justification that still comes out of from the Obama administration, right? And so, yeah, I wonder if you can address or comment on that kind of moral justification of the administration to be using drone planes.
Well, I think the administration, whether it would be the Bush administration or the Obama administration, for whatever political policies they're doing, of course want to couch it in the most moral and ethical terms possible. And they will contort whatever it is to fit what they need to do to morally justify what they're doing. And they're dead wrong. They're just plain wrong. And this is, they will continue to try to make sure, or to try to convince you that this is, that it's just plain right, that we have the right to assassinate people, that we have the right to, and by distancing themselves by the fiction of just, the pilot, there's no pilot right in the plane, just it really doesn't make a bit of sense to me. But I mean, all administrations definitely try to couch what they're doing in the most legal and moral and ethical manner. But
there's something peculiar though about drone weaponry, right? That's much different than the other forms of weapons.
Well, not really. I mean, when you really look at it, you could argue that F-16 pilots, as they fly by, they drop a 500-pound bomb, they kill 20 people in a building. And we say, well, that's just part of war. In a way, you could say, well, the drones, that's just the same thing. We just have the pilot farther away. But when you start talking about we're going to assassinate specific people, and we're doing it outside, this is a killer drone program, the assassin program that I'm really talking most about. That we're doing it in countries we haven't declared war, and we have the President of the United States that has a kill list. That these are things that are just unauthorized, illegal, and there's no way in the world that legally or morally you can justify it.
I think I know that Lee has a question, but